They're afraid to really look because they recognize what they voted for. They recognize what they're voting for, right? But they get their check and they got their union pay and they got all the things that make their life cushiony. You know, it doesn't matter that a little girl's being molested all the way along the way, but, you know, out of sight, out of mind.
You've kind of segued over to the kind of the immigration issue here.
Well, I guess, but I wasn't trying to necessarily just go to that. But yeah.
Well, it makes sense now. I made my other points, but you know, they go hand in hand if we're talking about our identity as a nation and nationalist type policies, and then the role of immigration, the identity of a people, its borders, its language, these various things that make up a people. But the reason, you know, what God wanted was to make a people for himself.
That's right.
Therefore, that people had a particular identity.
Yep.
And the fundamental identity of those people is that they knew God, and that they worshiped the true God, and that they lived according to his commands, that he had shown mercy to them and rescued them. And in a general sense, God has been merciful and gracious to us all in creating us in the first place. And then we're here in God's good creation, and therefore we should be submitted to and align our lives, the way that we live, with God's good commands for us. And in that way, any people group, whatever your traditions and customs might be throughout the world, if you know, at least some of them, there could be variety. There could be much diversity in people that honor God. You know, in terms of what food you eat or what music you play, and
there's truths and there's preferences, right? And don't get the two confused, because people often do. They get the idea of a preference and a truth very confused. They're two very different things.
And things, I mean, languages communicate ideas, and people have history communicated through their common language, and they share in ideas through that. And so all of these things have a good basis for giving a people a national identity. And so to honor those things and uphold them doesn't mean that you can't also value and appreciate the different ones from the people surrounding you.
Yeah.
But the where you have to draw a line is there is a literal line drawn in the sand or on, you know, in the dirt of a border, because somewhere along the lines you have things like your security at issue, but you also, you know, it's just defining how a people have coexisted throughout time together, and how they've worked together and they understand each other, and then, but if you also have those governing principles, and when God gives that to a people, and when he created Israel, he warned them, and he created those boundaries to separate them from the surrounding nations, because God was doing
so that they could be a blessing.
Yeah, and he was doing a particular sanctifying work, because he's calling a people out from the nations.
Sure.
So they were living as the nations post-flood, where God had judged the earth for being thoroughly corrupt.
Because he didn't have a nation to which he could reveal himself through, and the world could know him.
Well, and in particular, the people, rather than before the flood, rather than obeying God and filling the earth, spreading out and filling the earth, they decided to join together and collectively build up their power and their prosperity and rule in defiance of what God had commanded. And they wanted to leverage their ingenuity, and they built themselves a tower that could reach up to the heavens so that they could bring a name to themselves, so they could be honored for their accomplishments.
That was post-flood.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, pre-flood.
They did it before and after.
Right. So I imagine before the flood, there was similar type things happening.
Absolutely.
And then post-flood, same thing happened again. God judged the Tower of Babel, spread them out, and then that's the context in which he calls Abraham to make a nation out of him to separate them from the surrounding peoples who were godless, who did not know the one true God. And so establishing Abraham and his descendants as a nation, they would be known as a people who followed the true God. And he was progressively revealing himself.
Yes.
But they're called then, in particular through the law given to Moses, to separate themselves from those surrounding peoples, to not to eliminate them, to kill them in part in coming and conquering the promised land. But then also after that, or the justification for that, and then as well as the subsequent call to keep from intermarrying with those peoples and other such thing, is to protect them from the corrupting influence of these godless people.
Yeah.
So God,
and your fundamental purpose to know the Lord your God and to love Him with your heart, mind, and soul.
I'm getting at is the defining character of the people is to know God and to live according to His commands. So the people outside of that is not their defining characteristic. They do not know God, and they are not interested in living according to His commands. If any among those people are willing to do that, then they could come in and they could kind of be engrafted in from the outside if they are willing to submit to the laws of Israel, ultimately be circumcised.
I've always found it interesting that the first story after God tells Joshua to go conquer the promised land, the first story you see is the story of Rahab. It's the very first story. It's so interesting. We run over that story so fast, and I don't think we really understand what all that story is communicating, because we see two spies that go in and a woman in Jericho that hides these men, and she says, I heard about what your God had done in Egypt, and we trembled. I melted. Please rescue us when you come to destroy this city. And they say yes. And so you see this story of God saying exactly what you said. If you assimilate to what we believe and you recognize that God, Yahweh, is the one true God, and you will put yourself beneath that and come and live with us, you open doors. You're welcome. Everybody's welcome, right? Come on in. Here we go, right? And so that is a beautiful story. All these people that are like, yeah, the Israelites, they just went in and destroyed all these nations and killed the women and the children and raped and pillaged, and that is so non-historically reliable. That's not reliable. It's not anchored in history. That's not what happened, right? That's not what happened. But I find that story fascinating. It's such a beautiful story.
Well, and you see throughout, though God dealt severely with
not
the
trying to take
peoples
away from that
inhabiting the land, it was because those people were godless and wicked.
Yes.
And His people that He was establishing, He wanted
in His land, not theirs.
Yeah, a secure place for them to be, and He didn't want them to be corrupted and ruined by the influence of the godless people. So there's an effort to eliminate them, but there's also the willingness to adopt in those who, like you said, were willing to assimilate, and or a willingness to be kind and show compassion and be generous to and help those who maybe they didn't assimilate entirely, but they were still there in the land. They were a sojourner in the land. They may not identified entirely with Israel, but yet they weren't trying to subvert it.
Yeah.
because Israel as a nation was
They
still
weren't
ruling
bringing their
land.
gods into their temples and saying, hey, we need our God in your temple too, because that's tolerant.
Yeah, if there's
Because Israel would have said, no.
yeah, and the punishment for such things was death. So God was quite strict.
Yeah, we'll keep our God outside the temple.
God was pretty strict in maintaining allegiance to Him. The consequence was death.
Because it's in man's best interest that he does so. Because by the way, my book, you can pick it up at a store near you, An Apologetic for God's Kingship. It'll be about 2042 when it comes out. That's me about when I get done. But anyways, that's always been my theory surrounding. You brought up, pre-flood, man tries to rule. Post-flood, man tries to rule. Like you just see this constant subversion of God's ways and just rebellion. And that's always been my argument. It seems as if the call of Abraham was because God created Adam and Eve, and He created them good, and He created them in a good garden, and they rebelled. And then all of a sudden you get to Noah. The same thing happens. Man is living, it's wicked. It's utterly wicked that God looks down upon it and goes, oh my gosh, floods the world. Then all of a sudden, after a flood, you're thinking, all right, they got the point now. Surely, here we go. It's going to get better. Ooh, it got bad in a hurry, right? You see it all over again. King Nimrod, he's like, nope, first warrior king, let's go kill everybody, build some walls. We're going to build a tower to heavens, and we're going to show God who we are. We're going to make a great name for ourselves. Don't miss it. This is key. Then chapter 12 comes, and God says, I'm going to make you a great name, Abraham. We're going to make a great name for ourselves, chapter 11. I'm going to give you a great name, right? Don't miss that. That's supposed to be, you're supposed to catch that. So literally the calling of Abraham was because men couldn't get it right in a relativistic, non-nationalistic way of life. Right? They couldn't get it right. And God was like, all right, I'm going to have to call people by my name so that people can know me. And so Rahab recognized that. She recognized God through them, and God was willing to destroy entire people groups so that other people like Rahab could be saved. He was willing to destroy those who rebelled and could care less about the living God, and therefore could care less about everyone else. Hear that? This is why you don't understand us over there if you're a non-believer. You think we're crazy. Because this very fundamental thing you don't get, that life is about knowing God. That's it.
The God of the Bible.
The God of the Bible. This entire life is about being sanctified into the image of His Son, because there was something about mankind in the garden that we see that was flawed. There was something about being made in His image that He saw fit to do so that maybe we could know Him more. We had to be made in His image to be able to know Him, but also being made in His image, maybe it established a certain element of glory that we wanted to obtain for ourselves. And so God had to work that out of us. And so He made this thing called history to be able to sanctify that out of us so that when we get in the final garden, in the new heaven and the new earth and the new Jerusalem, that we're going to exist there with a recognition that we are not God, and that there is only one who is worthy of that position and that kind of glory, and that is God. And I believe this to be true because we're going to sing songs of His mercy, it tells us in Revelation, and therefore we would have to have some recollection of what it was like to be given the mercy of God if we were all of a sudden in God's presence. So although Adam and Eve might have been sinful, they had a ceiling on their ability to know God. We will not have that ceiling, and we will also know what we never want to go back to ever again, which is why I don't think we'll be able to sin in the new heaven and the new earth. That was a big question for me. What's going to keep us from sinning in the new heaven and the new earth? That is.
When it can be through the Bible as well as an awareness of history that helps us, that is actually intended, at least in this stage of history, on this side of heaven, to inform us so that we could be wise in how we order ourselves, how we live in this earth. And so we have God's wisdom as well as the wisdom through a godly awareness that we can glean through world history to see what's worked and what hasn't, to serve the interest of a people. And the beautiful thing is that if we're thinking clearly and rightly, then those things, those two things, both God's instruction and through His revelation in the Scripture, as well as what we observe throughout history of humanity, they confirm one another.
Yeah.
Is when a people orders itself on truthful principles, God-given principles, but also the wisdom. It of course is God's wisdom, but it can be learned and developed through trial and error and human awareness, but it's consistent with who God is. And so we build nations based on that. And one of the fundamental aspects of it in establishing a nation with a border, there's elements to that provide both for its identity as a people that can in some way be maintained and regulated, that all the people here in this place, however that's defined, but it's going to be defined by a border in some way. All the people in this place, we are agreeing to abide by these things.
Yep.
This is how we know ourselves, because we uphold these values. And maybe every individual within it doesn't, but as a whole, the guiding principles based on the founders of a nation, if we're looking at the United States, then they, based on their experiences coming out of Europe, they knew that these types of principles would give the people of a nation the best opportunity, rooted in the truths of natural law and God's law. However, the individual might have understood that, whether they were a Christian or a deist at the time, but they believed that those things were crucial. And
they had lived in a system that you've never lived under, so it would make sense to maybe hear them out, because you've never experienced the type of system that they lived under.
And they established these things and the boundaries that exist for then national security reasons. So in today's time, we want to understand why the issues around the immigration, the border, why they're so controversial. But again, trying to help people realize that much of the rhetoric and the way that the arguments are inflamed around these issues are really more rooted in the same kind of globalist, nationalist arguments, and it's propagandized rhetoric intended to mislead people, to have you make a decision or support a certain agenda, not based on what's actually true and good, but based on what they've convinced you to think is right.
And they appeal to your emotions, right? And they appeal to, with statements like this. You hear these statements floated around. Well, we're a nation of immigrants, right? That's what our whole nation's built up of immigrants. And then you hear, well, it's our diversity that makes us strong. No, your diversity does not make you strong. It is our unity of thought. I don't care what color you are. I don't care about any of that stuff. It's our unity that makes us strong. And our unity of thought, our unity of principles, our unity of belief in certain things that are right and certain things that are wrong, our unity under our Constitution. That is what makes us strong. And are we a people of immigrants? Yes, but we are a group of immigrants that came together under that unity of thought, which is why we are strong. We didn't just come and everybody bring their past garbage from their other nation and it just all work out. That's not how we became a great nation.
People came here because they wanted to.
They left the place to come to this
because
place.
They wanted to submit to the guiding principles
that they thought were good and that would make a great people and a great nation and a great place to live. And what we're trying to bring up is to just say, hey guys, we're compassionate. Come on in. That's not good for us or them. It's not good for anybody. That's the stupidest thing on earth. That doesn't serve anyone. But to have good principles surrounding immigration that call for assimilation is healthy for everyone, the people immigrating to our place and the citizens of our place.
Yeah, and that's not to suggest that someone immigrating here, whether they be from, Guatemala or Germany, that they ought to abandon everything from their cultural heritage and past. No, you bring many of those things with you, and you can still honor and appreciate them. That shapes your own traditions and the history of your people in one sense, but you are willingly coming to a place where you want so much to identify, because the truth, the values, the principles, the unity of ideas is actually understood to be superior in this place, because it's going to then produce a better outcome, a better way of life, a prosperity for the people living under that. So people, and much of that has been economic, but that can't be separated from the cultural values, whether it's freedom of speech,
you need a
freedom to worship and assembly.
You need a long self-reflection moment to know what it is you need to abandon. Because you're leaving this to come to here for a reason.
Yeah, you
can't bring it all. There's something that's a problem back. And we're not saying America's perfect. That's not what we're trying to say. But what we are trying to say is America, the beauty of America is as an individual, you get the opportunity to make stupid decisions. And you got to deal with the consequences of those stupid decisions. That's what's beautiful about America. It's like God's economy. God says you can say F you, God, and live your own life. Not going to turn out well for you. You're going to end up in hell, separated from God for all of eternity. That's where you're headed. Same thing's true about America. You get to come here and say, I'm not going to do that. But guess what? The consequences are baked into the cake. Not going to turn out good for you if you want to live in a certain direction, right? That's the beauty of America. But now we want to go, I want to make this decision, and I want this consequence. My reality. That's what makes me happy. Please.
And a nation can't, a prosperous nation, any sort of prosperous endeavor can't operate and expect to have a successful outcome chaotically, without rules, without guidelines, without boundaries, without order. And so if you have an influx of people coming across a border and they're undocumented, so they're therefore not accounted for in the orderly system of society. They don't have social security numbers. They don't have driver's license. They don't understand the language in order to.
But they can vote.
In order to, whether it's drive or
maybe twice,
or participate in the system with, there's a lot of things that could make it disorderly and chaotic.
But that's under the assumption that these people making these decisions are for the nation, right? That's the point you keep bringing up. They're not nationalists. They're not for the people, for the nation. They're for themselves and the globalist agenda.
Yeah, their interest, actually, the people promoting, whether it's the open border policy or any number of other things that have kind of undermined our culture and our values, they don't actually have in mind the interest of the American people. Not at all.
Close. They're just looking at who can we manipulate next, who can we deceive next, and get them to vote us into power for the next 10 to 15 years. And then you know what? After that, we'll start on a new crop of people. We'll figure it out somewhere else. We'll just keep winning these people over with lies and deceit. And good old Americans, man.
Appeal to your emotions.
That's right. Yeah. And we go, they're for us.
Well, and then a Christian often is going to want to say, well, we are called by God to treat people with mercy and compassion, to show hospitality to the foreigner, to the sojourner. Well, and so there can be a difference. It doesn't mean...
But you're not being merciful bringing someone into the system that's going to collapse because that's how you're doing it.
Right.
You got to be merciful to all people. Like the people here. I mean, what about that dude that's been waiting for 3 years for a green card, the law-abiding way, and then it's like, you should have just climbed over the wall, man, much quicker, much faster that way.
Or the people in your own population who are already competing for jobs and opportunity in life, and then you have a massive influx of cheap labor that diminishes the opportunity for others who have, taken part in the system, went to school, got their education.
We are encouraging lawlessness, which is why we have a problem on the border. We're encouraging lawlessness. We are not encouraging people to follow the law. We are saying, come on over and we'll just release you into the population until your court date. And you know what? We know you're such a law-abiding citizen that you climbed over that wall. We know you'll come back. Just go on into the interior. Have a good time. You're going to come back for that court date, aren't you?
Or how fair is it? How is it compassionate on the hardworking citizen who's paid his taxes into the system for all the social safety nets? And now our tax money is going to go to the people, or somebody's going to be able to have access. They're promised by every Democratic candidate a promise to have access to health care, even if you're not even a citizen of this country, when, I got family members who can't get the treatments they need because they're too costly, and the insurance company saying, no, it's pre-existing
Dude, I'm
condition.
like, what's the minimum? I'm a business owner, so I'm like, how much, catastrophic? Anything else I'll pay out of pocket, right? I mean, insurance is outrageous. And you know why insurance is outrageous? Because you're paying for 13 other people. That's why.
So the insistence of a citizen of this country that we have border and immigration laws that are in place, that are effective, that are carried out, that are enforced consistently. Our insistence does not mean that we hate the people trying to come in across that border, the people seeking perhaps a better opportunity for them and their family. We're not looking at those people with disdain in any way, thinking less of them because their skin color is different or because their heritage is different. It's because without that border and the laws in place, it is encouraging chaos. It's encouraging unlawfulness. It's encouraging an unfairness to the people of this country. So we look on them with compassion and we say, stop right there before you come in to this country. You are not allowed to come in here because we have to take care of our nation. And in the process, we can treat you humanely. Yeah. We can try as best we can to, give you some water, because I know you traveled a long way pretty recklessly and dangerously for you. If you happen to send your child through the wilderness of Mexico unaccompanied, or if you happen to send them with someone, with a stranger through the mountains of Mexico in hopes that you can get them into the United States, although that was a pretty reckless thing for you to do as a parent, I know you wanted a better opportunity for them, but we're gonna have to say no, and we don't want to turn them back loose with that stranger who attempted to bring them across the border. So we're gonna put pause. We're gonna hold you right here. What do we do with these hundreds of children coming unaccompanied across a border every day? Well, we're gonna, in an attempt to have compassion, we're gonna not give them back to the stranger who we found them with. We're gonna hold them right here.
Put them in cages.
We're going to have to hold them somewhere.
It's the pound at the border.
We're going to have to put them in a cage.
Which, by the way, is 30% higher with Joe Biden as president. But what might, think about this. What might be encouraging people to walk 1,000 miles? Right? If I'm 1,000 miles away from the borderline and I hear that there's a president who's pretty strict at the border and he's laid down some pretty stringent laws, and it's, you're going to have to abide by the rules, and we're going to let people in who go through the system. I'm probably not walking that 1,000 miles.
Yeah, there's a fence there that'll keep you from sneaking in.
There's a wall, and they're probably going to put me right back over into Mexico as soon as I get there. Yeah, it's probably not worth it. But when I hear there's a new guy in town, and
come on.
You get over that fence, you're good to go. And we'll even throw in some health care because you might need it after walking 1,000 miles, right? And so another thing people don't understand is this, like Dustin was saying, one of the largest sex trafficking increases happens during this kind of relaxed time at the border. Why? Because here's what happens. Some guy goes up, cartel guy goes up, and he goes, all right, take you with this girl, and you're with this girl, and you're with this girl, and you're their daddy, and yeah, go. go take them. Come on in. You got a little daughter, come on in. Right? And so what they were doing at the border, by the way, is separating those people because...
Separating kids from their families.
Yeah, from their families, right? But when a little girl, believe it or not, I know you would never know anything about this because, you just sit in your couch and watch CNN in your air-conditioned house. But when a man has like his grip on the back of your neck and he's shaking your head, how many little girls are going to go, this is not my daddy? Right? None of them are. So what you do is you separate these people so that you can get these little girls by themselves so that then you can ask them the question, hey, is that really your daddy? And you're hoping in that moment, I'm doing really well right now. I hadn't even cussed. In that moment, you're hoping in that moment that little girl is able to find the strength, even after being abused, probably raped and molested by this man because his goal was to dominate her. So by the time they get to the border, she has been utterly just discouraged, conditioned and discouraged to speak any truth. You're hoping that they will find the strength somewhere down inside of them to be able to speak up and go, no, it's not. Go effing kill the guy, right? Like that's what you're hoping for. But that's what the separation is all about. Because this is where sex trafficking is at its finest. And we just think it's just not a big deal anymore. Not to mention all the other crap that goes, but the sex trafficking is by far the biggest thing. But drugs, increased in disease and drugs and sex. It's utter absurdity to imagine that you think these people that are for all this are for people in general. Not just for Americans, but for people. They're not for people. They're for votes and they're for themselves and they're for using people. And the fact that you continue to buy into this garbage just makes me call you stupid.
Well,
it's absurd to me. I get real angry when I talk about the sex trafficking and stuff. Sorry.
Well, as a population, in particular Christians who might be on the fence, no pun intended, about some of these issues, is that we're sensitive to kind of the different sides of the argument, but the way that the positions are presented, the choices are only either you're an open border supporter of immigrants and all people from everywhere in the world and equal opportunity to give them a chance at the American dream, and so we need to welcome all these people across, or you're a bigoted racist who doesn't like brown people, and so therefore that's the only reason that you're concerned about the border or border wall or any of those things.
He's a white nationalist.
Yeah,
you just white people in this country.
You buy into that rhetoric. You allow the culture, the voices that are coming from the top down, who have a very specific agenda, though they hide it from you, but they want you to feel that way and unwilling to stand up for what's right and good and true because somebody else is going to call you a racist.
If you keep letting them hide it from you, at some point you're at fault. They can't hide it forever. At some point it is willful ignorance.
And that's what we were talking about last week.
I'm running out of compassion for the they hide it from you thing. I get it. I do. I get it. And I get trying to, but I'm getting to, especially with Christians, right? Maybe I'm not talking about, certain, but especially with Christians that are liberal Christians voting for this kind of stuff and then trying to say they're for people and they're against all these things. And these things are happening and they just stay right here. I really do think a lot of them they're afraid to really look because they recognize what they voted for. They recognize what they're voting for, right? But they get their check and they got their union pay and they got all the things that make their life cushiony. It doesn't matter that a little girl's being molested all the way along the way, but out of sight, out of mind, right? I got mine. I'm okay. I'm good.
Most people and Christians are inconsistent in their worldview. Problem one, they hadn't really evaluated.
I would kill the guy. Do not murder. I'm inconsistent.
Well, but because they're influent, because they're inconsistent in their worldview, and because they're disengaged from politics and in a real awareness of these policies, oftentimes, then they're susceptible to these arguments. that are made in popular culture that will make them feel bad for standing up for immigration, strict immigration policy, border wall, whatever it might be. So they're susceptible to that, and they give in to the rhetoric, and so they don't have a clear position, and if anything, they just give in to the left because the left uses intimidation, calling you names, trying to ridicule you, trying to intimidate you, to get you to conform. Yeah. And so that's the place we're in, is that too much of Christianity is so inconsistent in their mind and weak in their convictions that they didn't see through the lies of this deception, and then so therefore they've given into it. And now we find ourselves seeing the results of it in crises developing on the border and in other places. We're going to keep seeing it as long as we have Joe Biden in the office of president and extreme globalist, leftist liberals driving the policy agenda.
Okay, so Dustin threw you a lifeline. Now you know. No more grace from here.
Well, I mean, it's either.
At some point, if you're listening to this, now you know.
Well,
right?
and the judgment is not from us. That's the point that we're making. Unless you see these things, wake up to them, and we adjust how we respond in this environment, then the judgment is here. It is upon us, because our way of life is being and is going to continue to be wrecked. And that's not going to benefit anyone, including
anybody trying to get into this nation.
Yeah, the thousands upon thousands.
We're not going to be here to come into anymore.
Of immigrants trying to come into the nation now, or the people that are currently here.
Caleb, you're a conspiracy. America could never fall. Rome could never fall. Greece could never fall. Like, these places couldn't fall. I mean, it's like, there's a reason. What is the saying? Pride comes before the fall. There's a reason that saying exists. It's not just, inconsistent with history, right? And we could get into 1,000 other topics surrounding.
Well, and the thing is, most of these policies have actually been coming on pretty strong in the last decades. And we were asleep during that whole time for the most part. Many people were asleep.
We had been entertained to sleep.
Sure.
We've talked about this. We have put our attention into entertainment because we were comfortable, right? We were doing all the things that God has commanded us not to, which I'm sure the same thing happened, right? I'm sure Lot, we'll just skip Sabbath. We'll just do Sabbath 3 times a month. We'll go into the city this Sunday because we got it off, and enjoy Sodom. We'll go check it out. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. But my point is, you start to relax, right? You start to get comfortable. You start to relax. You start to have plenty, and then you start to see the alluring things that the world can give you as well, and you start to put yourself beneath that system. Oh, I need a bigger house because I'm making more money. Oh, people think I'm better if I drive a bigger car. I'll just go take out a loan. And now you got a house payment and a car payment, and you're under the system, and the weight of it all is just so difficult. And then they start to tell you how to live, and you're like, I'm not living that way. And they're like, yeah, but I'll do you better or this. And you're like, okay, I'll live that way.
Well, so that was the momentum. That was the trajectory. That was the direction things were moving. But there was enough percentage of our population who saw the flaws in it and were speaking up. Not to say all those people had a unified voice, but there was enough of an awareness of the dangers of some of these things. And that awareness coalesced around a political candidate that was willing to stand up and say, no, we are not going to keep going this direction because it is unhealthy for us. It is actually destroying us from within, and we are going along with it. And so that political candidate was successful. But he was very contrary to that system, and that system then mobilized its every resource, all of its power to destroy that candidate and the movement that brought him into power. But you saw, because Donald Trump was able to take the office as a president and reverse in 4 years many of the policies that they had put in place over decades. He was able to put a stop to it, and that's the reason it was so abrupt and so so offensive, really, because he in simple terms and perhaps sometimes either
he
colorful
threw a wrench
language,
in their world, their comfortable world.
It came in hard and fast, and so it appeared crude, but he said no.
When there was a lot of things that were open that he might be able to expose, and that would really throw a wrench into their world.
And that's what it did.
So let's get on the phone with the CIA and the FBI, and let's get all this thing going. We got to do Russiagate, and we got to do all this stuff. We got to keep things going until we can get back in office. God forbid he reveals some of the stuff that he could find out about.
So, but the thing is, and without going into all those things that we could, but what happened then, that Trump, in a change of direction, came in and put a stop and countered so many of these moves that had taken decades to implement, because their goal was to put it in, to be quiet about it, to be subtle about it, to do it slowly and smoothly so that we didn't notice. And Trump came in and put a stop to it, and that was such a shakeup to the system. They were so averse to things continuing to move that way, they couldn't let him have a second term, so they stole the election from him, of course, we know and believe. And and now
that's another video.
Now you see a reversal and a return back to what had been their agenda, but it's so now, because Trump had put such an abrupt stop to so many things, it is.
And because 70 million people voted, and they're like, ooh, we better get what we can get in, because who knows what might come next. Like, we got to speed up the process here.
Well, and it's such an abrupt return back to, because a lot of it had been reversed, that the return back to the policies that had been moving along unabated and uncontested for so long, really.
They missed out on 4 years. They got to regain those years.
Well, and it's not just a pause, because he reversed, he took us back, that they are having to catch back up, not only to where they were, but then the 4 years where they hope to go, and in the 4 years they hope to have under Hillary, and in the place they want to be, that the return back to these kind of extreme liberal policies are so much more obvious that it's a wake-up call. And what I'm getting at, it's kind of a good thing, in that it's so insane that 100,000 immigrants are trying to flood across our border in the last month, double, triple what it was in previous years. That
860 to 6,000 a day. I mean, that's more than that's like 7-8 times, right? I mean, that's the numbers: 860 a day to 6,000 a day in just a smooth 4 to 5 months, right? I mean, that's absurd. But again, I mean, through that and through the stimulus plan and through handing out money, and what they're trying to do is increase their base, right? They're trying to make certain in the things that they're signing into law and the way that they're trying to redo the entire election to where universal mail-in ballot all day long. Come on in. I wonder what Jeff Bezos thinks about that. It's so funny to me how he's all for that kind of stuff until it affects him in Alabama, right? I mean, but you see this, like, everybody knows it's a horrible idea. Everybody knows that. But they're like, even just not, they don't even care anymore. They're just like, it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to call us out on it. Universal mail-in balloting. Everybody stay home. Just send it in. Just send it in, right? Let's hand out money. Let's get more people on welfare. Let's bring more illegals in. Let's get this base up to where the conservatives never win again, right? I mean, the game plan is right before your eyes, and they ain't even hiding that stuff. and nobody is paying attention. Like, it's just like, oh.
Well, and so the many of the things that the beauty of Trump being out of the way, though, is that they can no longer blame him for
they're trying.
They try.
Pelosi yesterday. Well, we just inherited a broken system on the border. What?
So,
Wait, no, sorry. We just inherited a broken system. Sorry. That was very unchristian-like.
Many of the things that they're doing is their people, hopefully, at least more people, are able to see the hypocrisy of it all.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that's the only hope, that if in this moment and through the hypocrisy being exposed, that perhaps Christians and people that recognize the absurdity, the extreme negative consequences that are going to come from these policies, that they can see the hypocrisy, the deceit, the willingness to lie about these things, to characterize Trump's policies as inhumane and that he's locking kids in cages when he's simply using the facilities that were already in place
under Obama.
Yeah, put
under
in place
Obama
from previous administrations, facilities built by President Obama and now being employed.
I'll give Biden, he did maximize their efficiency. Right, I mean, he's more of an efficient president.
So how inhumane is it? How inconsiderate is it of these people that you invite them to our border in mass, multiply many times over the numbers that are showing up? You got 500 unaccompanied minors showing up every day who have to be put somewhere, dealt with somehow.
And the way the media spins that now, that, well, it's we have to take care of them. We have to put them, and that's literally what they'll say. They have to be put somewhere, right? Not they're in cages by Joe Biden. I mean, it blows my
Facilities.
mind. It's
housing facilities.
Yeah, it's really nice. We're taking care of them. 5-star.
But you see just in the way they use language, the deception of it. So if people can't see through it,
I'll tell you what, 2024, if it goes down and something don't change in 2020, this show will be the Dustin show, because I'm going to the farm and y'all can see it later, because if we don't see it between now and then, if we're here by then, but if we don't see it, if this hasn't exposed, like Dustin said, the beauty of Trump not being in office is we don't have to say it anymore. Trump don't have to say it. Nobody has to say it anymore. It is becoming so obvious, and they do not care at all, because they really think, you said this one time, so I'm going to blame you on this. They truly think their base is that stupid, that they're that dumb, or they're just that greedy and selfish, one or the other. But they don't respect you at all as a base, because it's become so obvious at this point that it's like you just sit back and you have to laugh not to cry. Right? Because policies have consequences. Like, that's the sad part. Like, they have real consequences. It's like my boys at my work. I got these 13 guys that work for me, and they're like, what are we going to do if minimum wage happens? And I'm like, guys, y'all don't understand. Minimum wage, I would love minimum wage. Corporations love minimum wage. They're like, huh? I'm like, the only thing minimum wage hurts is you. I was like, you see that machine over there? I'm going to charge $10. I'm going to charge 3 times what I pay you. I go, so if I'm paying you $10 an hour, I'm going to charge $30 an hour. And they go, okay. I go, if I'm paying you $15 an hour, what am I charging? They go, 45. I go, okay, what am I making? They go, 30. That's right. I'm making $30 an hour. Minimum wage has just benefited me. You know why? Because what minimum wage does is it justifies corporations to go up on their price. And in your head, you go, oh yeah, because we got more money. They can charge more money. It's okay. Go up on your price. So your wage may go up 10%, and corporations go, raise it 17%. We make an additional 7%. And then prices rise, and you're still out of the market, so you can't afford anything. So all it hurts is you. It just hurts you. Like, my God, like, understand this. Like, it just hurts you. All these policies just hurt you. They don't care about you. It don't hurt me. I'm okay. I'm not griping and complaining and frustrated because it just hurts me. I go to my dang farm. I'll be done. Right? That's what people I don't think understand. Like, we don't do this because we're frustrated because just it's hurting us. It's hurting your average, everyday American. And it's putting more people in the lower class every day. And it's harder for people to have children and raise families and live a simple life. And that is their goal. Because a globalist needs slaves. They don't need citizens.
And we do have a concern for the selfish concern for our way of life, our quality of life that we share with everybody here in our nation, our common way of life, and the opportunity for our children to have a future for themselves. And so, our hope in voicing the frustrations and trying to bring clarity to the situation is that people can see through it all. Our frustration is often that people can't see through it, but yet we understand also why is the reason we spend the time trying to point out the lies and the deceptions of the media and the other influences over culture, is because we know people are being deceived, and therefore we're attempting to highlight and point out the truth so that we can wake up and no longer be deceived, but reclaim that which is ours. So our hope in all this, in our desire to see God's kingdom come on earth, is we know that it can only happen through a process of repentance. And repentance can only happen if you see the error of your ways, you see the flaw of it, you see the dangerous direction that it's taking you. It's leading to your demise. When you turn away from God to go your own way, is a path that looks right to man, but in the end leads to death. And we want people to see the death, the destruction, the outcome that awaits. And the concern that we have for everyone, including ourselves and our children and our community and the people we care about. So we want people to wake up, recognize what's true, what's false, to turn away from the falsehood, back to what's true, which is back to God, and to live according to how God would have us to live, which in the end would result in our prosperity, our benefit. And if that's true for us, if we are receiving the blessing of God because we are living according to His commands and the ways that He's prescribed, then we can then utilize that prosperity, because this also is what God commands, is go and be a blessing to the world around you. And in so doing, you are a witness in the love and compassion and the generosity you would have, and the way that you would share what God has given you to others, not just as handouts, but to build them up, to let them prosper through their own labor and efforts and the fruit of their land, and to see them too become a blessing. And then it's no longer us who are the only supporters of the world. We're building up more people who can be helpful to the world around them, until a whole earth is filled with people who are in right, true worship to God, and therefore living according to how God would have us live, and experiencing the prosperity. And we're unified in a one world under God, made up of many sovereign nations, but one earth that's cooperating together because we're submitted to the values, the truths, the principles that we know are required of us to enjoy all that God's made, and ultimately enjoy God and one another together forever. So that's our hope in all this.
And that's why we hope in eternity.